When her wound becomes your cage, Nietzsche and the hidden weight of her insecurity. There is a kind of woman whose touch feels light, whose voice trembles with softness, whose gaze flickers with need, and you, unaware, think, she needs me. It flatters the masculine instinct. To protect, to provide, to be the one she leans on when the world grows too heavy. But Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of will, of clarity, of dangerous truths, would offer a warning here, not against love, but against the illusion of salvation. Because not all need is innocent. Not all softness is safe. And sometimes what looks like vulnerability is a trap you will not see until you've already lost yourself. This is the beginning of a story men rarely tell, because it doesn't start with violence. It starts with care, with the desire to help, to rescue, to lift. And Nietzsche, who watched humanity invent illusions to avoid its own suffering, would tell you plainly, be careful when you kneel to lift someone. If they have no intention of standing, you will remain on your knees forever. The woman with low self-esteem does not always scream for attention. She may not manipulate with force. Often, she pulls with silence, with absence, with that slight look of disappointment that says, you were supposed to make me feel whole. She becomes not a partner, but a mirror that always reflects your failure. No matter how much you give, it is never enough. Nietzsche saw through these dynamics. He believed that human beings, when unable to create meaning from within, will always try to extract it from others. The weak do not always appear weak. They often appear sweet, sensitive, even spiritual. But they lack one thing, a center. And so they spin around you, orbiting your strength, feeding off your certainty, until you begin to feel not strong, but depleted. This is how it happens. You try to encourage her. She resists subtly. You try harder. She weeps, withdraws, promises to try, but only if you stay close enough to keep her from falling. You become her spine, her meaning, her emotional gravity. And at first, it feels noble. You are her anchor, her guide, her safe place. But Nietzsche would ask you, at what cost? What happens when your strength is no longer your own? When your moods are no longer free? When your energy goes not toward creation, but maintenance? This is not love. This is emotional servitude. And it is hidden behind a beautiful disguise, the appearance of love, the illusion of tenderness, the performance of someone who just needs a little help. But Nietzsche did not glorify the rescuer. He respected the one who stood tall and refused to be used as a crutch. He wrote, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." Meaning, even self-loathing contains ego, control, demand. The woman with low self-esteem does not always want healing. Sometimes she wants containment. She wants you to take her pain so she doesn't have to feel it. But what begins as sympathy becomes a transaction. Unspoken, one-sided, unending. And you, who thought love would elevate you, now walk bent, drained, obligated. Nietzsche would not tell you to hate her. He would tell you to see clearly. Because love without vision is sacrifice without honor. You must ask yourself, is this woman building herself? Or am I being asked to be her foundation? Am I loving her soul, or managing her void? If the answer makes you flinch, you are already too deep. But the truth, once seen, can no longer be unseen. The quiet sabotage, when her insecurity becomes your responsibility. She doesn't yell. She doesn't demand. She simply falters and looks to you to catch her. This is not war. This is slow erosion. And Nietzsche, who spoke more boldly than most men ever dared, would see the pattern for what it is, the morality of weakness. Not weakness of body, but of will. A woman who has not faced herself, who has not made peace with her image, her worth, her place in the world, does not stay small. She becomes a gravity, pulling you inward, drawing from your strength not to grow, but to survive. And the worst part, you will believe you're doing the right thing. You'll tell yourself, she's been hurt before. She needs to feel safe. I can help her heal. But Nietzsche would interrupt that thought. Not with scorn, with clarity. He would say, beware those who make their suffering your duty. Not because they are evil, but because they are unconscious. And unconscious people do not form relationships, they form attachments. And every attachment is built on the silent agreement that you will carry what they refuse to confront. At first, she'll test you in small ways. A comment about your attention. A subtle withdrawal when you show independence. A shift in tone when you express strength that doesn't include her. She doesn't mean to sabotage, but she does, because your power reminds her of her lack. And instead of rising with you, she asks quietly, emotionally, that you come down. Not directly, never openly, She will do it with looks, with absences, with soft phrases like, "You're different lately," or "I just feel like I'm not enough for you anymore." She is not attacking. She is trying to survive. And this is what makes it so difficult. Because she is sincere, but she is sincerely unwell. Nietzsche would tell you, do not mistake the emotion of sincerity for the strength of truth. You can feel for her. You can care. But if you do not see, you will be bound. Because slowly she is shaping you. She is calibrating your energy. She is building a silent contract. I will remain soft and sad if you never outgrow the need to save me. And you, if you are not aware, will comply. You'll shrink your ambition. You'll censor your voice. You'll doubt your instincts. Also, she can feel secure. And yet, she will never feel secure. Because self-esteem cannot be borrowed. It cannot be given. It must be earned, through confrontation with self, through solitude, through struggle. She will never become whole through your love. And the more you give, the more she unconsciously resents you. Because love that does not awaken her to herself only deepens the void. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot command himself must obey someone else." And if you do not command yourself, if you do not hold the boundary, step back when you must, and let her face her own storms, you will become her emotional servant, not her partner. So what does protection look like? Not escape, not rejection, not cruelty. It looks like truth. It looks like you saying, "I will walk beside you, but I will not carry you. I will hold you when you fall, but I will not live on the floor with you. I will listen, but I will not shrink myself so you feel taller." Because if you become her pillar before she learns to stand, she will cling and call it love, and you will wither and call it loyalty. This is not love. It is emotional codependence disguised as care. And Nietzsche, who feared no truth, no matter how sharp, would call you back to the responsibility of your own becoming. When you try to leave guilt, grasping, and the rebellion of the dependent soul, you begin to wake up. Something in you tightens not with fear, but with clarity. You see how small you've become, how quietly your freedom has eroded. You realize, I need space. And that's when everything changes. Not violently, not loudly, but with the slow turn of her face, the quiet tremble in her voice, the sudden darkness in the room. You thought this would be a clean break. You thought honesty would be enough. But the woman who cannot stand on her own does not let go easily. She does not say, "Don't leave me." She says, "How could you?" She does not shout. She trembles. She collapses. She becomes smaller, not to soften your anger, but to activate your guilt. Nietzsche, who had no patience for false morality, would name this for what it is: emotional blackmail rooted in weakness. It is not evil. It is not planned, but it is still manipulation. Because the woman with low self-esteem does not want love, she wants certainty. And when that certainty is threatened, she doesn't ask how she might grow. She asks how she might survive. And the only tool she has is you. So she uses the only currency she knows, her sadness, her silence, her wounds, her memories of your tenderness. Remember how much I loved you. You said you'd never leave. I gave you everything. You said I made you whole. And now the mirror turns. You are no longer the rescuer. You are the villain. Not because you harmed her, but because you tried to return to yourself. This is what Nietzsche saw beneath the surface of romantic tragedy, the will to power disguised as love. A dependent person will do anything to avoid abandonment, even abandon truth. You try to explain. You try to soften the blow, but it only fuels the story. You're not who I thought you were. And maybe you aren't. Maybe now you are something clearer. Less romantic, more real. But she doesn't want real. She wants safe. She wants unchanging. She wants the version of you who stayed close to her pain and never asked her to rise. And so she throws everything at you that once made you stay: her tears, her softness, her vulnerability, her threats to break without you, or worse, her silence, heavy with implication. Nietzsche warned of this. He said, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind." And in this moment, you are that snake. The relationship is your old skin, and to shed it is to be reborn, or be bound forever to a version of yourself that no longer breathes. But how do you leave someone who is breaking? Nietzsche would not tell you to harden. He would tell you to see, to refuse the guilt that is not yours. Because guilt is a leash. It binds men more deeply than desire ever could. And the woman with low self-esteem, whether she means to or not, knows how to use it. She will not chase you. She will make herself small. And in her smallness, she will ask you to be smaller too. She will say, "This is love." But Nietzsche would say, "This is dependency." And dependency is not love. It is fear with flowers in its hair. You must remember this. You are not abandoning her. You are refusing to abandon yourself. You are not cruel. You are clear. You are not responsible for the soul of another, only your response to their presence in your life. If she cannot walk with you, then walk alone. Not because you are better, but because you are no longer willing to lie. And that is the moment you become more than a man in love. You become a man in truth. When her story rewrites you, Nietzsche on resentment and the legacy of departure, you leave, not in anger, not in cruelty, but in clarity. You walk away with the weight of your own decision, carrying silence, sadness, and maybe even guilt. But also freedom. A space begins to open in you again. A breath you hadn't noticed was missing returns. And just as you begin to rebuild, you hear her voice again. But not directly. Through others. Through distance. Through narrative. She says you changed. She says you used her. She says you made her believe in something, and then disappeared. You feel it first as confusion, then disbelief, then pain, because you know how much you gave. You know what it cost you to carry her, to hold your tongue, to be her shield while your own soul withered. But it no longer matters. You are no longer real. You are a symbol. A character in a story she is now writing to protect her from herself. This is Nietzsche's great insight. When truth becomes unbearable, the weak rewrite it. Not from malice, but from self-preservation. Because if she were to admit that your leaving was justified, that your growth was valid, that your love was misused, she would have to face herself. And she can't. So instead, she reshapes the ending. You become the coward, the narcissist, the emotionally unavailable one, the man who ran when things got real. And now the people around her, perhaps even those once around you, look at you differently. Because people love a story, especially one soaked in vulnerability, told with tears in the eyes, by someone who just wanted love. But Nietzsche would interrupt the applause. He would say, "Distrust those who suffer for sympathy, for some suffer not to rise, but to be watched." This is not to discredit her pain. Pain is real. But pain does not equal clarity. Pain does not mean the story is true. Because pain, unexamined, becomes resentment. And resentment is Nietzsche's great enemy, the soul's refusal to take responsibility for its own suffering. He wrote, "Nothing on earth consumes a man more quickly than the passion of resentment." Now imagine that passion in someone who has made you her myth. Someone who once saw you as her savior and now recasts you as her destruction. This is not revenge with violence. It's narrative violence. And it can stain you if you don't see it for what it is. So what do? You do nothing. You do not defend yourself to those who already believe her. You do not fight to restore your image in eyes that never really saw you. You do not argue with the version of you that lives only in her wounded imagination. Because Nietzsche would remind you, truth does not need to scream. It only needs to endure. You stay on your path. You grow. You build. You remain rooted. And the story she tells begins to collapse, not by force, but by contrast. Because time reveals character. And over time, your calm presence, your quiet strength, your refusal to bite back, will speak louder than her pain ever could. But still, you must guard your mind. Because the greatest risk now is not her story. It is your reaction to it. If you let resentment answer resentment, you fall into the same weakness. If you begin to define yourself in opposition to her view, you are still letting her shape you. And that is the final trap, to become hardened by the very person you tried to help. Nietzsche would say, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. So gaze carefully. Let her have her story. Let those who need that version believe it. Because the man you are becoming no longer needs to explain who he is. He simply is. Love without losing yourself, Nietzsche on strength, will, and choosing whom to carry. You've walked through it all now. The soft burden of her pain, the guilt, the silence, the story rewritten in your absence. You've seen how a woman's low self-esteem, if left unexamined, becomes not just her prison, but yours. And yet, you are not bitter. Not if you've truly grown. Because the man Nietzsche calls forth is not the one who hardens, but the one who wakes up. He does not close his heart. He opens his eyes. He sees the landscape of love as it is, messy, human, layered with longing. He no longer dreams of rescue stories, or of being the savior, or of being saved. He chooses. And that, Nietzsche would say, is everything. Because to love unconsciously is to walk into another person's inner chaos without your sword, without your center. To love with awareness is to ask, does this woman add to my becoming, or does she ask me to abandon it? That question is not cruel. It is clear. Nietzsche, often mistaken as cold or cynical, was none of those things. He loved deeply, but he refused to let love become a reason to collapse. His call was not to isolation, but to elevation. Become who you are, he wrote, not become what they need. So what does it mean to love a woman without being overtaken by her suffering? It means you do not confuse her need for your purpose. You do not trade your truth for her approval. You do not bend your backbone to soften her fear of standing on her own. It means you walk with her, but you do not carry her. You witness her pain, but you do not absorb it. You hold her hand, but not her identity. Because the moment you begin to shape yourself around someone else's wounds, you are no longer a man. You are a mirror. And Nietzsche would warn, the mirror will shatter. So then, how do you protect yourself? You return to choice. Not reaction. Not guilt. Not habit. But will. You choose to observe clearly, to see her beauty, her brilliance, and also her brokenness, without being pulled into the dream that you can fix her. Because no one heals from love that comes with the hidden message, you are incomplete, so I will make you whole. Healing comes from being seen, yes, but also from being held accountable to grow. And sometimes, the most loving act is to walk away and let her confront the void herself. Not to punish, not to teach a lesson, but because staying would cost you the man you are becoming. Nietzsche's great gift to us is the reminder that love is not the same as surrender. Love is fire, and fire must be contained, not extinguished, not scattered, but focused. Because when you love from your full self, not your fear, not your need to be needed, but your strength, you do not just love better. You love cleaner. You give her the space to rise instead of the illusion that you will carry her forever. You give her the dignity of growth instead of the comfort of dependency. And you give yourself the freedom to remain true to your path, to your purpose, to your soul. So remember this, not every woman who reaches for you is ready to walk beside you. And not every hand you let go is a loss. Sometimes it is a return to yourself, to solitude, to sanity, to the slow, steady climb of becoming the kind of man who no longer trades truth for tenderness. What Nietzsche would ask of you now. You are not cruel for protecting yourself. You are not cold for walking away. You are not heartless for refusing to be the therapist, the father, the emotional life raft for someone who never learned how to swim. You are simply awake. And Nietzsche would say, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Let your why be strong. Let your love be conscious. Let your hands be open, but never empty of will. Because there is a kind of love that builds, that burns with purpose, that stands on 2 feet and says, I choose you, not because I need to be enough for you, but because I already am. What to watch next? If this story shook something in you, if you recognized even one of these moments from your own life, then don't stop here. In our next video, we'll explore the shadow side of the feminine, how men project the wound and the muse. Because until you see how much of what you love in her comes from the parts of yourself you've buried, you will keep calling it fate when it's only forgetting. Until then, stay clear, stay grounded, stay whole.